Welcome to Design Language, our first video foray into the world of media, video media. So if you're here, hopefully you're a subscriber to our newsletter. And what we're looking to do today is try to actually take some of the principles that we talk about on our newsletter. Design Language focuses on giving people the language vocabulary around how to talk about design, to understand those concepts so they can become better product builders over time. And what we wanted to do is bring these to life. So we want to take these concepts that seem maybe abstract on their own in an email and actually bring them together by talking about specific applications that we like and use and kind of applying those fundamental concepts to them. What is that, David? Did I get it right?
Yeah, that was good.
Right.
And it's in this session today, we're going to be talking about Slack. I'm really excited to talk about this because it's a good opening for us, Jeremy, because, it's a tool that I think, you use every single day. So
all the time.
Users who have Slack are in it. There's like a strong lived experience. It's not theoretical opinions. And so hopefully we'll be able to start to contextualize, some of the items that you like or may not like about it.
Yeah.
The other things why I think Slack is a great candidate just for our opening talk. It is an enterprise software product. It's considered that right now, but it really broke the mold for what is enterprise software, right? It feels like a consumer product.
Right.
And especially
and it's used in that way. It's used in that way a lot. It's like oftentimes not even a business context. It's used for people like groups of. I've had one with groups of friends and random things like that. It's just using it as a purpose. So that is a really interesting one. We'll get into that. I think like that spread case.
And then the other thing I'm going to call out just to kind of set the stage for Slack is, as an enterprise product that started off consumer, it's one of those few products that sits at this interesting intersection where it's used by both, a 3-person startup team as well as at IBM with 20,000 team, on it. And I can only imagine or empathize, with the tension that creates or has created, I think, over the years as the Slack design and technical teams, make big trade-off decisions around how to handle those two different user types.
Yeah, and not only the technical trade-offs, but the sort of business trade-offs, right? Like, to what extent does enterprise win because the money is bigger, right? And so those decisions get prioritized over maybe you and I using it together to organize to design language, right?
Exactly. So hopefully from this session, we're going to help you really contextualize the way that you, not just the way that you feel about the product, but why you actually feel that way on the good or the bad. And then start to connect, what principles in design and the business decisions in the UI that you're looking at are resonating for you so that you can make better decisions in the products and the decisions that you're going forward. So just to start us off, I want to start with some gut reactions around what we love, what drives us crazy with Slack, because I know I have a few. So Jeremy, help kick us off here. Let's maybe start off on a positive note before we get into the negative. But what is it that you absolutely love about Slack? What makes it indispensable?
Well, just on like a gut level, I think, it in many ways is kind of the operating system of a lot of, at least certainly in my business. I use it as, we use it to coordinate things like design language. I use it on my existing client-facing products. I've got, you can see the workspaces down left. I've got some clients have their own spaces. I use external connections to others. And so it becomes this kind of unified hub of communication, like for good or bad. And I think there's some challenges there that we'll talk about for sure. But overall, I think that's pretty good. That's kind of what I like about it is it's sort of ubiquity. It's like, what's your Slack? Send me your thing. Send me your link, invite me to your room or whatever. And you get in, like, I know how to use it. Everyone knows how to use it. It's pretty obvious. What about you?
Just double clicking down a little bit on that, right? What what I heard you say is that you like the ubiquitous nature of it, right? So you can go to anyone pretty much in the world, it feels like, and say, hey, why don't we collaborate on Slack? And
Yeah.
both people, immediately, know how to set it up, know how to get into it. But what led to that ubiquity? Like how do you get that ubiquity, and what makes it that an advantage?
Well, I think what led to it is kind of a guess, but if I had to put on my analyst hat, I'd say it's probably the fact that they had a really good product-led growth strategy of like actually making it, it's free to use at first. You can invite your team, you can be up and running really fast, and like you're going immediately, right? Like there's no implementation, there's no setup. It's, download it, you're chatting in seconds, like literally seconds. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's probably part of it. And that makes it so that it's very easy to get going, certainly against like something like Microsoft Teams, which involves all kinds of implementation and God knows what enterprise thorniness you have to move through. And then of course, like once people start using it, they start liking it, and it's easy to create, another workspace, right? Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've got a thing for this. Like, let me set it up for this, or add a channel. And it just, then it's sort of that flywheel effect of success begets success.
I think you hit on probably one of my most favorite things about Slack, which is speed, as you mentioned, right? And I see that as two things that are happening there with the product, right? One is the setup speed, which you mentioned, right? You and I could meet for coffee and within under 10 minutes have a Slack channel set up where we're collaborating or doing work on. That the design considerations that just went into, how that ramp up and what it takes to kind of get started, and keeping it just low friction with minimal information, was clutch. And the other thing, part of it is it still feels private, right? Like when you set up a workspace, like that's our workspace and whoever we decide to kind of bring to it.
Yeah, that is nice. The user control.
Yeah. The second dimension of speed, which, is probably inherent to what Slack does, but it's that Doherty threshold metric, which like everything loads super fast.
Exactly.
When I send a message, and when I send a message, I'm pretty confident that's like near real time, right? That's right. Being sent to everybody in that channel. There, like everything just feels so snappy, and speed is invisible design that matters a lot.
Right, totally. And especially in this kind of context, in an enterprise context, when people can't afford for things not to work, that's super important. And I think the other thing that it does well is that if something isn't working, right, they indicate it. They use indicators. It tells you that it's down. It tells you that it's not working, that the message is delayed. Like you don't, in that context, the visibility of system status and indicators, what's going on. If it's down, you can tell. So that's like something that they've thought through quite a bit. I thought is pretty good.
The other thing is, I'm pretty confident. Like I could invite my mom to the channel to a Slack, and she would know how to use it. And that there's a lot with the organization and the layout of the screen that isn't very novel. And that lack of novelty, that 3-panel layout where you have like the sidebar with the channels and then the messaging pane, uses that common region principle where the elements within a shared boundary are perceived as being grouped together. So exactly that left panel, I'm going to navigate between my channels, right? And here's where I can like pick up the DMs, and that makes it just instantly learnable. And it's one of those things where when Slack came out, it was thought of as being highly innovative, even though in my opinion, it was kind of a recreation of an AOL chat room.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And then like with like slowly layered complexity, which I think they did a pretty good job on, all things considered.
But like by not trying to overthink and be too crazy with the UI and the UX from an interaction standpoint, it contributed to their success, right? Because people
Absolutely.
just knew how to use it and pick it up.
Yeah, and that's a concept. I don't think we've sent the newsletter for this. I think it's probably the next one, called Jacob's Law, which is basically the idea that most people spend their time in other applications, right, that aren't yours. And there are a lot of patterns that already exist. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just, if people know how to do something, take advantage of that. And instead of trying to be novel and weird and interesting, unless that's something that's important for your application, but in most cases, it's not.
Yeah, like the layout of the actual screen teaches you the mental model without any documentation. Right?
Exactly.
A
Exactly.
new user can orient in seconds because, like, they just they intuitively know how
Exactly.
each piece functions.
Yeah, and I think that's actually probably a great segue into the next piece here of us. I think you and I both did a little homework here, kind of identified a few things that we like about it, and then kind of a few things that we don't. So I think maybe a good time to dive into those individual items. What do you think?
Yeah, I would love to. I definitely have a list of grievances.
Yeah, well, yeah, this is not a puff piece. There's definitely problems with Slack, and I think there's like a fundamental problem with Slack. That's a bigger question, which we'll get to at the end.
Yeah.
But for starters, on just purely product design, right? From a design perspective, thinking about some of the concepts that we talk about in the newsletter and that are really good to internalize and understand. And David, you started to talk about this one a bit, and that is like the use of hierarchy here is really good. Like Slack has a ton of information in it, and it's coming at you like light speed, right? And they do a really great job of those hierarchies. So as you mentioned, like you've got this left to right hierarchy. On the left is the top level of the hierarchy, which is the workspaces themselves, right? So you see like here you've got the rope, the one we're in where we have design language. I've got a few others down the side. And these are the top level primitive, right? These are self-contained universes that exist, right? And then once you move in a level, then you've got the sub-navigation effectively for that workspace. So we're in the robot heart workspace, and here you've got all of the top level nav for that workspace. And again, like you talked about common region, that's a perfect example. You see like the workspaces are in all the way on the left. They're indicated by this darker purple color and they're inside a container, so you can tell. Then the next container comes to the right, right? So it's a left to right, the way that, certainly Western languages work and the way that most Western readers would read. And they come, and then this is that sub-nav. And then I'm selected home, and then there's even this third level of sub-navigation, right? This control panel here, right, is directly reflective of this. And that changes as you switch, right? So that becomes that panel. And then you select the actual channel itself or the conversation that you want to have. Then that opens up in the primary communication panel. And there's even a fourth level of navigation here, which is across the top. And that is the sub-navigation of the channel itself and all the different features and functionality. Then the conversation exists within that, right? So it's a very clever and very efficient way to organize a lot of information very cleanly. So I think that they've done a really nice job there.
Yeah, just to underscore that, I think the information architecture, or IA, that's deployed here is just really strong, really tight. You have the clear mapping between workspace, channel to thread to message, right? Like that part's clean. I will say that once you get into the message and that last kind of navigation, that's where it gets a little bit messy for me.
I agree.
I understand that it's complex, but I also feel like there was some missed opportunities in bringing in specifically horizontal navigations and kind of how the relationships between those play with each other. And I'm going to specifically call out one, which is like the thread fragmentation and lost context. Like threaded conversations, at least for me, and I feel like something changed here kind of over the years with the way that that's tied to notifications and things like that. But I have frequently missed threaded conversations because of their lack of visibility on the screen as of recent.
That's interesting. That's interesting because I was going to say, like, as a matter of hierarchy and information organization, I think it's pretty clever because again, it's like all the way to the right. You know, it's the lowest level primitive of the conversation, right? But I agree. It's like I really struggled when threads. I started using threads in earnest. You know, I used it on a project not long ago, and someone was like really good and like really diligent about it. And it took me a while, and now I've found that I like them a lot more, but it took me a while of extended use. It wasn't something that came naturally.
Yeah, let me be a little more specific, at least in the experiences that I had. I think part of the problem with threads is not so much the layout or how and the orientation in which they live, but the notifications and creating visual like notifications around them to highlight where they are, because I've noticed two things.
The notifications are.
Yeah, and I'd be curious if you've seen this. Like I have seen responses in threads that needed to exist outside of the thread, or responses to a thread that existed in the main channel, and people got confused around where they were posting it, and it created just more messiness rather than better organization at the end of the day.
This checkbox flummoxes me. This also send, because this says basically I can reply within the thread itself. Oh, we're hidden by our faces, aren't we? Sorry. Can I do? Oh no, there's no way to do that, I guess. But anyway, it gives you the option in the thread to also send it to the main channel, which to me is like, that's where it starts to fork and get weird. I don't quite understand the value of that. And maybe it's like this circular loop where you're meant to.
It goes back to the notifications. I think the designers were like, well, we don't want to bother everybody in the company about this side conversation, but maybe sometimes we need to. And I think that's where things just really
got probably a very weird trade-off. I agree.
I mean, and let's be blunt, like, I don't think that this was never a problem in the early days. These aren't like small team problems. This definitely was something that occurred because, some large enterprise, sent out a notification to 100,000 employees, and they did,
Right. Well, it's true. If you're in a Slack channel with 50 people, right? Like, and you're trying to have individual conversations, like, it's impossible, right? Because you need like the effective breakout room. So it's like a clever idea in it. It's a very hard design problem. It's easy for us to sort of like flippantly dismiss some of the challenges there. It's like,
agreed.
Agreed. Yeah. But I see that the challenges are very real. Okay, cool. Let's move to my next one, which is this one. I don't even know what concept this would be necessarily, but the idea of delight. And by that, I just mean what was really interesting about Slack, and you mentioned this in the upfront, is that it doesn't feel like an enterprise product. It was kind of the first enterprise software product that basically introduced the idea that enterprise software doesn't have to be boring, right? So many, up until this point, everything was like some sort of Oracle looking thing, right? Some like terrible UI, with no fun or joy or happiness or emotion whatsoever. And Slack introduced, the confetti and the little wood knock sound when you get a notification, or, those things. It turned it into something that was like a little bit more playful and fun. It kind of, that consumerization, things you would very commonly see in a consumer app, but not an enterprise app. And it kind of made that okay. And I certainly, having designed enterprise apps, in the world since Slack, there's a lot more openness to that now, which is cool.
So supporting GIFs or GIFs, however you pronounce that, was a huge factor in that. I mean, I feel like I've consumed most GIFs through Slack over the years.
It's a good call. And do you think I can't think of any other place where emojis were used in a corporate context until Slack, right?
Yeah.
Like you would never, maybe in an email or like something, but not commonly. Whereas this not only turns that into like an acceptable thing, but in some cases like an actual real way to communicate. You can indicate things just by using emojis instead of replying in text.
Yeah, I question, especially with Slack and the rise of it, how much of its nature that we're describing right now is also based on a kind of a psychological background that, like I mentioned this earlier, that reminded me of when I first saw it. I was like, oh, these are like AOL chat rooms back in the day.
Right. Yeah.
And you think about like the rise of an AOL chat room, like that was for pure entertainment and joy. Like it was pure fun. There was not a business context related to it.
Right.
And it brought this thing that I think we all psychologically connected with fun into the business setting, and allowed it to kind of proliferate in this informal business context way. Like it's the business casual of the digital world.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
That started off, and I think a lot of us, at least for myself, it felt like I was back in an AOL chat room, interacting with my colleagues in a different manner.
Yeah,
because the alternative to this, was email.
Email, or I mean, that was kind of it.
Was there anything else? Like I don't even remember.
Like Skype was around, and like there's a Skype, like there were instant message platforms, and I think some companies use some version of it. I remember using one for years called FlowDoc, which was around. Which may still be around. I'm not even sure. There was like things like it, but I think this was the first one to really approach any level of adoption at the enterprise scale, like really meaningfully.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like you mentioned instant messengers, like those were largely, I know a few companies like IBM and stuff had their versions that were locked down in a corporate setting, but people kind of brought their own handle.
Yeah.
It was like very personal, and then maybe you would use it for business. I'm thinking of Skype as that example.
And then my one last thing, I have my third kind of thing that I like. It's a very small thing, but I think it's kind of funny, and it like dovetails off this enterprise concept. And then I'll pass it to you, David, to give me some of your likes. But I'm going to open this now. And so if you go to, actually, that's a bad example. You go to this one, right? And if I go to, notify everyone in this channel, and I do this, and I click this, it gives me this error prevention notification. It's like, did you mean to notify all 10 people in this channel, right? It's like, and this is only 10, that's not so bad. But if you're in a room with like hundreds of people, that can be bad. And this doesn't say it in this one, but there's other times where it'll tell you if people are in other time zones. So it's like, you're going to wake someone up who's in India right now, or who's in, Romania, or whatever the case is. And so I love this way. And this is a good example of friction used well, right?
Yeah, you're about to wake up everybody in the organization.
Yeah, like, do you want to do that? And so it stops you with this like preventative error prevention. So I guess that's redundant, but the idea that it prevents you from making this error unless you mean to, right? And then it's very intentional. And again, like that, it's good friction.
And just to call this out, because this is one of my likes, just the app mentions is massive. I don't know if they were the first to kind of create that interaction, but that was so powerful. Being able to tag a single individual to ensure that they got a notification within a channel, or hit like the whole channel. That just provided, a way to kind of what's the word? Like you're balancing, like that's the one thing with notifications that I think was working so well, right? Because I can comment in a channel, but take kind of a scalpel to say, hey, I actually just want to make sure that these folks get like a definitive alert, that I need their attention around something. And to me, that was a competitive design technical like breakthrough. Like that was a design win in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed.
Had we seen it before this? I
can't think of like not in this context. I think like I want to say it was Twitter that introduced the @ concept originally, where you could tag someone specifically using the @ sign or the @ symbol. Yeah. And I think that then everyone just borrowed that going forward.
Yeah, that's 100%. I think you're 100% accurate on that.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, those were my kind of top line ones that ladder up to some of the concepts we talk about in the newsletter and on the guide. But curious, kicking over to you, what are some of the ones you called out?
Candidly, Jeremy, like I had basically a lot of the same ones that you did. I don't. I don't know. I know one thing that we didn't mention, which it's a like, but I feel like it was one of those things that I don't know how important was the ability to kind of customize the look and feel of the application. They gave in the early days just a lot of ways where you could kind of like make that look and feel to kind of coordinate with your desktop environment. That was nice. Good luck finding it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like now Salesforce took this over. It's like now you're getting the sort of the enterprise and shitification.
Yeah, and I'm going to call one thing out here that like I used to love about Slack, and it's no longer there, was when they acquired and incorporated, I think it was called Screen Hero, where you could actually do the paired programming in real time, with a remote participant. And the teams that I was working on back then, I mean, that had to have been 10, 15 years ago, potentially.
Right.
But I mean, you couple like the Huddle, Screen Hero, and real-time chat capabilities, like in an environment where you are doing something like paired programming or pairing with a designer. It was just unparalleled level of collaboration that was able to happen there. And I have a feeling that got deprecated because as they needed to deal with the enterprise scale customers, I think they probably ran into some technical limitations. Yeah. And if I'm going to be blunt, I feel like you see it all the time with Huddle. Huddle frustrates the hell out of me, right?
Oh, this thing? Yeah.
I mean, think about how many times you have the option to to rapidly jump into a video call with someone. You're more likely to put a Zoom link or a Google Meet link in Slack than you are to hit that Huddle.
Yeah, only time I use Huddle is like if it's literally like, hey, I gotta talk to you like right second, like it's here and it works, but like, everyone has so many connectivity issues with all these platforms. And I think this also just platform sprawl. I mean, there's Google Meet, Zoom, Huddles, there's God knows what else there's. And then we're on Substack right now using a recording, like a video chat recording tool. I mean, there's just so many of them now.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like I've dove in and out, but what about like, what are some of the things that you don't like?
I would say that like the big thing, there's a lot of like visual noise and a lot of information on these. And I think overall they've done a really good job. And I don't want to minimize how hard of a design challenge this is. This is one of those examples where when you're operating in Figma, for example, or in your design tool working on something like this is going to be one of those hard truths where the rubber meets the road, where actual content and data gets put in. It is a fire hose of information that is constantly coming at you. So I think they've done a nice job, but I do think there is some opportunity to make it a little nicer, specifically in the chat room, the chat itself. I actually think like the navigation, as we talked about, is pretty good. Like even a good example is like these embedded, this is like probably a lot bigger than it needs to be right here. And also it's like, just as a simple thing, but like, why isn't the thumbnail over here? Like it takes up 3/4 of the visual pane, right? Like, why don't they, take advantage of that space? Like data density is important in this app. And so why don't they do that? It's like one example. And then
it's probably for the scanning, like you can read, you know what I mean? Like if you're just reading down the page.
But it just now, like, if you're reading down and you've got this huge block it takes away from some of the density that otherwise makes it like clear and scannable. And then this isn't even a terrible example because it's just an article, but oftentimes if you use any of the integrations, it just adds all this metadata, and there's so much of it, and it just feels like they haven't spent a lot of time on that piece. Like as you connect things into Slack, which is actually a really powerful use case for it. But I actually find that oftentimes the connectors add noise and not enough value, just because we did this. We had in our own Slack. Can I pull up? Yeah, we have this automation, right? Here you go. This cursor automation, which does an automatic sweep of our guide, or the code for the design language guide, right? And I accidentally had it set to do every day, which is too much. But it's like, there's a lot of information here. It's like, why is this all here? And it creates this, it's 50% of the viewport height.
Yep.
And it's just all here. And it just doesn't feel like that should be the case. This would be a good example of like, drop the critical bug sweep thing, right? This first line, and then maybe automatically thread the conversation and add the rest.
But yeah, and also why isn't that, like you said, threaded and then alert by exception?
Right. Exactly. And so that's like a good example. And I find all of the integrations, and maybe there's configuration to it, but I'm just not going to spend the time to figure it out because it's like not important enough.
I think that was the time I started to ignore you on Slack.
Exactly. And that's a really, I think you're right though, because I think that's around the time you were starting to miss things, because you would see those notifications, and I shouldn't have had them come every day. And I was just testing out the cursor background agents, but like you were just starting to be like, oh, it's that again. So I just ignore the notifications. And so when all that information has come like rocketing at you, it's easy to just kind of ignore it all. So there's that piece. It's just like that. There's a lot of visual noise and visual clutter that maybe doesn't need to be there. And it feels like all of the restraint they've showed in important places, for whatever reason, in this last part of it, they just don't show it or don't do it. And I don't know if that's just a product of, it's not them who's coding the integrations, it's the provider that you're integrating with, and it's just how the API works or whatever. I don't know what the rule is, but that part is, I find annoying and frustrating.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to bring something up maybe more recent now, which is like, I feel like Slack needs to redefine what what's the word I'm looking for? Like spiritual center is. And I say that as it relates to the Slack bot and AI. And I find myself questioning, and I'm using AI quite a bit. I'm fairly, hopeful and optimistic about the, benefits that it can bring in. And I love interacting with it. But I started to find myself like, do I need this in Slack? Like, what's the purpose of Slack? The purpose of Slack for me is to like collaborate and get real-time information from people that I'm working with.
Right.
And, I know Salesforce may be strategically trying to like shove, enterprise questions and everything into Slack. But what I've seen is that thing adding more noise to the channels rather than actually like, helping. And maybe we're just early on in the life cycle of it. But it was getting in the way of my communications rather than actually helping me connect with the individuals.
That's a good call, because I do feel like it could be, one of the challenges with sort of agentic AI right now is like orchestration, right? It's, you're doing it in terminal windows, and you're doing it in, Claude Code desktop, and you're doing it in all these places. Whereas it actually feels like it could be an opportunity. But in this instance right here, I have Claude installed on it. Like I could talk to it, but I don't ever do it here. I just don't, it's just not, I don't know if it's like a workflow thing or what, but I guess I'm just not entirely sure how it connects to the rest of the system. And I could envision a world where like this would actually be a really awesome place to interact with it. But I'm also confused by how it works, because like, okay, it's my Claude is connected. Can you talk to Claude? And if so, are you using my credits? Like, how does that work? And it's like, I don't care if you do, but I just would like to know how it works. It's like those kinds of things I don't find super clear.
Yeah, I feel like there's this whole strategy going on behind the scenes where they're like, we're just going to like, make Slack the operating system, for the business. And that's not being driven by the users, right? Like that is a selfish business goal
Right.
I think right now is running into some headwinds, and it'll be interesting to see how it ultimately plays out. Because if I'm going to be blunt, if they want to go down that road, there's probably some big changes that they have to make to the design and
Hmm.
to what the product fundamentally is.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Like, eventually you're going to have these conversations, because not only are you going to have this sort of one-on-one conversation with this AI agent, but they're going to be threaded into the conversations themselves. And I've seen it used in interesting cases. I have a friend of mine recently joined a company, and inside their Slack, they actually set up an OpenClaw instance that can access the company data. And that OpenClaw has an account on Slack, and they can talk to it and thread it into conversations. That was a very cool use of it. So I could see that being valuable, but it feels like an opportunity. Even us who are, I would say, at the forefront of using AI in a lot of cases, but we use it for ourselves, we use it for design language, and we communicate on Slack. Those things haven't connected yet.
This is not Slack specific, but sounds risky, man. OpenClaw, like in there, connected to like, can I start asking about employee salaries? And
I don't. It's, from what I understand, it's very locked down, but I don't know what that means. I know that there's challenges there, but in any case, that's one that I think, going back to sort of the visual noise piece, like, it has a risk of, you're going to have the integrations in these tools are already a little bit messy and a little bit noisy. And as soon as this kind of AI agent army starts spinning up around the enterprise, like, it has the risk of just being an absolute mess.
I want to call one thing out, which I think a lot of these challenges and so forth are specifically there as a result of scale and growth, right? Which generally is seen as positive. And I have so much empathy for that, right? Slack was designed as a team tool, right. And I can only imagine, that team, suddenly having IBM as a customer. They've got 100 different teams on 100 different Slack instances going, hey, we need to like centralize all of this,
right?
And the technical feat, to re-architect and deal with that was probably not easy under tight timelines.
No, agreed.
And it definitely probably pushes the idea, because like, within an enterprise, then you're really asking, like, the information architecture gets completely blown open, right? So right now you have separate workspaces, I imagine, for separate groups, but then if your IBM is like every department a workspace, and then
there's this whole organizational design that
like how do I communicate across those, and where do they overlap? Like it can get pretty harried, when you start to think about operations at scale.
Yeah, agreed. So anyway, that's all to say, like, again, very aware of the problems, but it feels like it is a problem that they are going to have to figure out how to solve, because as the amount of information is already high, and adding another whole layer of inputs that are going to come in through these integrations and these agentic things, it's just going to get more insane. And so they're going to have to, I agree, like, take a step back and think about like what that means. The second thing I would add is like kind of thing I don't like about it, and this isn't, I don't know if this is like a product design thing as much as it is like a product strategy or product existence thing, but it's like, is Slack good in general? Like that's the thing. Like, are these tools actually useful in the way that they're intended to be, right? There's a lot of ways it's nice because you can just reach out, get an answer to things and so on. But at the same time, it is the ultimate distraction machine, right? It can be very hard to focus. If part of your job, and most people is, especially in knowledge work, like, they need uninterrupted time to think and focus. And Slack is the absolute enemy of that. It's like people just clamoring for your time and demanding it all the time.
Well, so not just that, it sets the expectation that
right.
You should respond to me immediately.
Exactly. And like, and that's some part of it as cultural, but I think that it is designed into the tool in that way, right? It doesn't feel like and there are some things you can do. For example, like you could set myself as away or pause my notifications, like, so they give you a little bit of control there, but it would be nice at the very least if there was something that was a kind of a do not disturb that was a little bit more aggressive. That's the wrong word, but the idea of like, hey, I'm in focus time, like I'm being blocked, and it almost has, oh my God, not necessarily like an autoresponder, but when people are out of the office and it'll alert you. It says like, hey, David's at, this Microsoft does this really well in Teams. So if your calendar is set for out of office and I like message you on Teams, there's a little banner that says David's out of office and might not reply. Right? It would be nice if in the Slack channel there was something similar. It's like, oh, David's in deep focus time and might not reply. And it sort of introduces that as a concept of, or I'd rather like normalizes that as a concept of saying like, I'm blocking time to think this through. And it's an important enough concept that Slack actually has a feature for it. Not something you can kind of put together by setting an away message, but saying like, normalizing the idea that I am not going to respond to you right now because I'm working on something and I will get to you shortly.
Yeah, it's amazing. Even with AI right now, like and this is one of my issues with Slack, is the balance in notifications between severity and frequency, right? And getting that well or accurate is completely lost. And I see this on my Apple phone, right? iPhone, they changed in recent iterations. And the expectation is almost that I'm going to like sit down and spend 30 minutes configuring my notification schedule and profiles. And I'm just like, dude, this is literally the last thing I want. Like we would have been better off with me just saying, on and all on, all off, between these
Start
hours,
there.
and I'll deal with the consequences after that.
Yeah. And I think that's a problem. Like, yeah, certainly not unique to Slack, right? To your point. And it's, how do you control it? And that just feels like a larger, not even just product design, but almost a social design problem. But, like what is the expectation that people have of instant responses? But the question is like, does the existence of Slack in an organization alone just automatically by virtue of it existing assume that like, hey, you need to be on call to answer things like when they are there? Right? Because a lot of it is a social organizational thing too, right? Like if you're in a channel with people and a boss is asking questions and they're getting instant responses, like you can't really ignore it, right? Because like that's the expectation, right? And so there is a piece there.
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna put the stake in the ground. I think always on messaging as a paradigm is just kind of terrible for how humans work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like we have enough distractions and notifications. So that's the question. Like all of the great design questions or the design problems that Slack solves, like almost the most fundamental one it actually breaks, which is like, is this actually good? And not only is it sort of social, but also just in the business context, like, how much time is lost and wasted because people are constantly context shifting and constantly responding to things and, fake work that's happening and fake conversations that aren't necessary. And if they were an email, people might be like, you know what, this isn't that important. I don't have to do this. But it's like some random brain fart that they're like, answer me.
And to be clear, right? Like, it's not entirely Slack's fault. Like this is a cultural problem at organizations, but they definitely pioneered the category and brought it into the enterprise.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because it's normal. Like even if you're not Slack or you're a Teams org, right? And, but I can't, there's not a lot of companies that don't have one of the two or some version thereof, right? Where, this idea of like companies slowing down and being a little bit more intentional and asynchronous with their communications, I think there's probably some value there. And there's probably, frankly, like money to be made in a company that can like slow down and think a little bit more deeply and strategically, especially now as things continue to accelerate.
And the alert that you get at 10 p.m., could be that production is down or, your silly coworker trolling you with a GIF.
Exactly. And I'm guilty of this too, because I like working at night. And so sometimes, if I'm working on something, I might drop a note in Slack to you. And it doesn't mean I want you to answer me right now. It's just like, it's top of mind. I'm working on it. And it's like, and so there's this idea that I might say like, hey, no need to answer this now, but when you get to this thing, but like, it's weird that I even have to qualify that.
Which I can't believe I didn't mention this in the likes, but it is one of the things I like. You can create a pretty awesome knowledge repo
Oh yeah.
within the channels, right? So as you're mentioning, like sometimes it's about dropping in there, not because I want to alert everyone then and now of the new, but like I want to keep all the information, well organized in
Right.
there. Which I do, maybe I'm in a pessimistic mood today, Jeremy. I don't know. But brings me up to like a second frustration or another frustration that I have with it. Is it just me, or is like search pretty fucking awful in Slack?
I just basically don't use it.
I keep finding myself trying to like make sure I save certain things because I was like, if I have to rely on search, I'll never find this again.
Yeah, and they have this later concept, which is cool. You can book, especially like bookmark stuff to add to this later queue. So I use that every now and then if it's like I'm getting bombarded with things and I know I need to come back to. But again, like that almost feels
gave
like
me one new habit I need to form.
Right. Well, it feels like the very fact that you need to like pin conversations to come back to later almost is an admission of this problem in the first place, which is like the fact that I need to bookmark a conversation to come back to is therefore a sign that like maybe this is like a broken communication paradigm.
But there's so much knowledge that lives in
oh
Slack.
yeah.
And like, the gap of basically like where that information lives in the Slack channels, and then where you can like find that information I think that's like one of their biggest UX debts that compounded over time.
Yeah. And like you've got, you can like search the files, within up here if we don't have many things, like some random photos and stuff. But there are some ways to do it, but I agree it's not like super clear. I wish there was some way of doing it. And maybe there is. Like maybe there's, you can drop.
I get it too, like as a business, just putting my empathy hat on, right? The they optimized for real time, but sort of underinvested in retrieval, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm sure if I was the product manager responsible, I probably would have made the same choice. But
yeah, exactly, right.
It is a missed opportunity, though. Hopefully, AI will start to help, solve for some of that.
All right, we've been talking for a long time. Let's try to land this plane. Overall, I mean, I think we've talked about why it's really interesting and really well designed in a lot of ways, and has some fundamental challenges, and frankly, even social challenges in other ways. But the reality is, we're going to keep using it. Right. I mean, even knowing that, even having just said all the things we just said about the instant on, are always on communication, right? We're still going to use it. At the end of the day, it's still part of the lifeblood of the way companies work. And so as a result, like, I have no intention of switching out of it for the time being. Right. So overall, I say I still generally like it for my day to day. The pros outweigh the cons, although the cons are real.
I mean, hands down, right? Like I've collaborated with people who aren't on Slack, and there's just nothing that really kind of comes close. I've seen people try to use WhatsApp in kind of a similar capacity, and candidly, they just fail. And where I think they fail is pretty much the last point that we were talking about. Like one of the most powerful parts, all things considered, is, honestly, I do trust it as a knowledge repo. Like I trust that like I can throw things in there, which makes the search part a little bit more frustrating for me. But like I trust that in a way that I wouldn't trust a WhatsApp channel, right? As that knowledge repo.
That's a good call. Like that built-in trust that's there as a result of it having existed for as long as it has, and becoming part of the sort of DNA and operating model of modern companies.
Yeah, I do think we need to ask, like, as in that context, though, still, like I said earlier, the always-on messaging paradigm is kind of terrible, both for health and like culturally. So. I think trying to figure out, I think it worked in the AOL era because like that was for fun, right? Like we did that to meet new people, like kind of collaborate. And we brought that into the workspace, which was positive, right? And had tangible business value. But where it concerns me is like, right now your boss can get you anytime you want.
Right.
Now when
Especially
you
if it's
add,
on your phone.
yeah, but now when you add AI agents, now we're talking about systems and bosses, expecting you to always be on. And I think that expectation is flawed.
Yeah, I agree. So I mean, that's a larger societal macro question, but it does lead beg the question, modern companies, newer companies, is there like a different way of working? I know, like, for example, Basecamp, that company and that product sort of is the counter to Slack. That's sort of their marketing pitch, is like, we are a sort of asynchronous, slow, more methodical organization. It's, everything isn't instant, always on, responsive. It's, we do a lot of writing, and it still has the documentation and knowledge base, and it creates that sort of central source of truth for the project, but at the same time, like, without all of the noise. But to be honest, I haven't worked at a company that's done that in so long. I don't even know what that's like.
Well, I think the struggle around that, and this has shown up time and time again, is how structured and organized do you really need to be to move efficiently? And the reality is, like, the more structure, there's this idea that, like, yeah, we're going to have threaded conversations within projects, within tasks, and everything's going to have this clean relationship. Reality is, like, that actually does not shape to the way problems are solved, or the way that they're
true. Collaboration is messy in reality.
And Slack addresses that challenge head on, right? Like, it allows for a little bit of that messiness, to live within the channels, so that you can get to the best solution very rapidly.
That's a good point. That's a good call. And I have seen it work like that. When people get into a thread or a channel, and it's just bang, 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 and then the problem does get solved. So it's interesting. It's almost like it has its place, but as a result, like, the negative externalities have bled into all the rest of it, of the communication. But again, like, I'm not going to stop. It's like, it is still the best tool for now.
Agreed. And let's be frank, right? Other channels are broken too. Email is still broken. The async, I think, versus sync tension is a design problem that nobody has really solved well. Quite yet. And Slack is the best version of a flawed paradigm, if we want to frame it that way.
I think that's a really smart way of thinking about it. Cool. Awesome. So this was our first session for you sole viewer who's here checking us out. I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments what you think about Slack, anything we didn't talk about, anything that you want to add to the conversation or rebut. We're not sort of super fixed in our thinking. So by all means, like, challenge us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, just to close it out, I mean, I hope you saw, like, how to look at tools like Slack. Don't just evaluate what's on the screen, but, like, understanding the business decisions behind them. Because I think, hopefully what you took away from this is that business choices do show up in designs ultimately over time.
True.
And the tools we use every day are the ones that, sometimes we stop seeing or acknowledging. We start seeing them again when we need to analyze them, like we did. Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Be sure to follow us here on YouTube and or Substack and or wherever else this video is. And check us out at designlanguage.xyz. You can subscribe to our Substack there, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Don't know how to stop it.